Hello and welcome to PropTech Leadership Talk, where we speak with eminent PropTech leaders who are disrupting real estate with cutting edge technology. I'm Ravi, CEO founder of Proptechbuzz, the world's largest and only B2B real estate platform. EV adoption is accelerating, and the buildings that aren't ready for it are already falling behind. Today's guest works at the forefront of that challenge, partnering directly with real estate developers, owners, and operators across the country to help them build smarter EV charging strategies for their portfolios. We are joined by Jeremy Cohen, Director of Real Estate Partnerships at Switch Energy, a North American EV charging technology company that has deployed over 25,000 chargers across residential communities, commercial buildings, parking facilities, and municipal networks, trusted by industry leaders including Greystar, CBRE, and Google. At the heart of Switch is Cortex, their intelligent charging platform that pairs open OCPP certified software with purpose matched hardware, enabling properties to deploy more chargers on existing electrical infrastructure without costly upgrades. I'm going to talk in detail some of these aspects of their tech. Jeremy, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me on, Ravi. It's a true pleasure.
So, Jeremy, I have broken this segment into actually three in this podcast into three segments. The first one is about leadership, and then we move on to the company, the technology, and so on. So, you work with the real estate developers, owners, and operators every day on EV charging strategy. What has been the most common misconception that you encounter when you first walk into a conversation with the property team?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are no two properties that are the same. That's across the real estate industry and also when it comes to EV charging. And I would say the biggest misconception that we encounter is how costly a potential project may be. I think that when you're a real estate developer, owner, operator, obviously cost comes to the forefront of any project or, any CapEx improvement. And I think the misconception is that it's going to be so costly. You're bringing in potentially new energy infrastructure, you're purchasing hardware and software. And the truth is, there are so many available incentives and rebates and grants out there that are incentivizing EV charging across the country, whether that's at a state level, a city level, municipality, or utility level. There are very generous programs that are offsetting the capital expenditure for such projects. So once, if you're an owner and operator, you start to see the economics behind what's feasible when you take advantage of said rebates and grants and incentive programs out there, you start to see that actually it's not so expensive, any longer, and that you can absolutely get chargers in the ground for way less than you might have anticipated.
Excellent. And was there a specific deal or property conversation that changed how you think about what real estate operators actually need from an EV charging partner?
Yeah, there again, like buildings are, there's no two that are the same. The different real estate groups operate quite differently as well. So I can tell you this, you have some groups out there that are just interested in maybe what I call dipping their toe in the pond. They just want to add one or two chargers at a property and kind of see how things shake out. Maybe they don't think there's a demand yet, but they kind of know it's coming. We're happy to oblige on that front, happy to be your partner and just kick off, the relationship. Then you have some groups that are already starting to see EV adoption happen way faster, I think, than they anticipated. And those conversations start to unfold as, well, how do we deploy chargers a little bit more at scale at our portfolio? And that takes a little bit more coordinating. Those conversations tend to be, we're starting to add maybe 4 to 6 chargers at a given property across a number of properties at a given portfolio. And then the biggest conversation on them all is dealing with very large, real estate owner operators who have already deployed EV charging. Maybe they were the early adopters a couple of years ago. So they already know how many chargers are at their site. They already know there's a ton of EVs at that site. And now they're looking for what we call like a technology refresh, where you're bringing in new hardware, new software that is capable, that is much more capable than what their current systems are providing, and how that current system integrates into the larger ecosystem of prop tech, property technology, energy infrastructure. So I kind of segment these three different client profiles because, again, they're not everyone is the same on their EV charging journey in the real estate industry, but we have to be conscious and cognizant of it because everyone is going about this at different speeds. It just matters how fast they're going, or if they've already gotten there and then they're looking to do a refresh because what they've installed years ago is no longer meeting the needs of what the current environment is offering.
Excellent. So, where do you see EV charging fitting into the broader conversation around property value, NOI, tenant experience, say in the next 3 to 5 years from now?
Yeah, that's a good one. This conversation and this question has been coming on more and more. So I think EV charging as a whole is shifting. It's shifting from this conversation of what was a land and expand type of conversation of those early EV charging companies just trying to plant chargers in the ground and using it as a land grab, essentially. That conversation, I think, has shifted. That is now shifting to now of uptime, reliability. There's a lot more EVs on the road. And when you're talking about, let's say, multifamily environments where, a third of the US in particular and Canada live in large multifamily buildings, and people who drive EVs tend to reside, if they don't have a single family home, they're residing in a multifamily home. They want that experience just like they were living in a single family home. They want to be able to have a charger that's maybe dedicated to their assigned spot or in a shared environment. They want to be able to use it. They want to know that every time they go to it, it's going to work. Just like every time you go to a gas pump, it works. And what was once a potential amenity that was maybe separating building A from building B as it, pertained to tenant attraction as well as tenant retention, these chargers are little economic devices as it pertains to the real estate owner or operator who's invested in them. So that conversation of NOI is becoming a lot more relevant. And they've sunk the capital into purchasing this product, and they want it to produce revenue. They also want it to work for their tenants, but also, as with any capital expenditure, they want to see that ROI. So the longer that we're keeping these chargers online, active, reliable, and responsive, and they're just working as intended to do so, you're starting to see NOI really become part of the conversation, because now that's adding additional revenue stream to an owner or operator's bottom line just by providing a really good experience and adding a piece of technology that has essentially enhanced the lives of the residents in which they serve. So as we kind of look out to the next 3 and 5 years, that conversation of reliability, uptime, ROI, and NOI is just becoming way more relevant as EV charging starts to scale and EV adoption starts to scale, and it has just become completely mainstream. People aren't going to think twice.
Excellent. So, Jeremy, will be shifting to company questions now. Thanks, Jeremy. For anybody who has not heard of Switch and hearing about Switch for the first time, why don't you give us an introduction about what the company does, what problem in the real estate market where you built to solve?
Yeah, so Switch, we're an EV charging solutions company. We are a 10 years old organization. And really, Switch's ethos was providing EV charging at scale without having to do large infrastructure upgrades. And what does that really mean? That means that we are providing advanced technology on the software and the hardware front that is allowing buildings, owners, and operators to not have to do these large infrastructure upgrades to enhance the value of their property by providing EV charging. And really the problem in which we solved, which is on the load management and energy infrastructure side. So our software, the Switch software, we are a network, is natively load balancing these chargers. So at a given time, at a property, let's take multifamily for instance, you have your lights on, your HVAC on, washers and dryers are going, anything in a normal capacity that a building would see on a day to day level. Now you've added EV chargers into the mix, and that is naturally adding load to the building. What the Switch software is essentially doing is these are smart chargers. These chargers are speaking to one another. They recognize where the charge is at a given time, and it's essentially shifting power back and forth to ensure that one, we're not overloading the current electrical capacity or electrical infrastructure that's already in place. Two, we're still able to add chargers at scale because of this advanced load management component. So really our solution was created for the multifamily environment. So that way you can still add chargers without having to do costly infrastructure upgrades, which I think any owner and operator, it's music to their ears.
Nice. So, one of Switch's most compelling advantages is the ability to add more chargers without expensive electrical upgrades. How does that work, and why does it matter so much to a property owner?
Yeah, I touched upon it briefly in my last response, but we kind of segment energy management into two different buckets. I'll call the first one what the Switch software is doing is native load management. Again, these chargers have become smart chargers now that you've added software to it, and smart enough where they're communicating to one another, but also recognizing the charge levels that are going on at a given time. So that way we can dispense energy accordingly. Advanced load management is really a Switch differentiator through a product in which we have called Switch Control. And Switch Control is a panel metering device. So this control essentially is a module that will live on the existing panel. And it's typically a mixed load panel because at a given multifamily property, that panel it has breakers that are shared between some of the electrical components that I shared earlier, such as lighting, HVAC, elevators, dishwashers, dryers, you name it. This panel metering device is now speaking to the chargers. So we're able to actually understand in real time the loads that are happening at the panel level where other electrical components are actually at its peak or at its low. So what we'll do is typically in a multifamily setting, charging is taking place at night. People come home from work, let's say 5 or 6 at night. They're done for the day. They come in, they plug in their car. They're done. They go home up to their apartment and they're eating dinner and watching Netflix. Well, what's happening during that time is again, the lights are on, the HVAC is on, people are doing the dishes, air conditioning is going. Now you've added EV chargers into the mix. What that panel metering device is essentially doing is it's recognizing everything that's happening at the building level and it's throttling the charger usage down because there's too much load. The load at the building right now is probably at its peak because everyone is home from work and everyone is doing the same thing. When people start to go to bed at night, let's say around 10, 11 o'clock at night, and the lights are off, maybe the AC is turned down, people aren't running the dishes. Now that panel metering device is telling the chargers, hey, it's time to really throttle up the charge and start juicing up this car. And that's what it's doing in real time. So by the time people start to wake up to go to work the next morning, let's say 5, 6, 7 a.m., they have a full charge. They don't care how long it took. Maybe it took a little bit longer than an average charge, but they have a full charge. And it didn't disrupt the panel or disrupt the breakers. And we were understanding in real time what was going on. That is really the value in which we are providing to these buildings. And when you look at the cost of electric, that only helps what we call these peak demand, these peak charges, because the chargers were not charging when the building was at its maximum load, when everyone was home at 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. We have essentially started the charge during the low peak hours of, let's say, midnight, 1, 2 a.m., where electricity is at its lowest because it's not being used. So it's only a value add for owners and operators to really just understand this system and the value of it because it is a true win-win.
Excellent. And Switch also offers a zero capital installation model. It covers hardware installation and electrical upgrades for a single monthly payment. Do you want to explain this?
Sure. Yeah. So, like I said at the beginning of our conversation, I think no two properties are the same and no two real estate groups are the same. This financial vehicle that we have, it's called charging as a service. And you hit the nail on the head, Ravi. It essentially bundles into one fixed monthly payment the hardware, the EV charging hardware, the software, the switch network, and the installation cost, which is arguably the most expensive cost of this whole project, the cost from the electrician, into one monthly payment spread out over a few years, just like a car lease. And the value of that financial vehicle is actually really important because you have different real estate groups that look at capital way differently. You have some groups that have a lot of dry powder and they can easily deploy capital because they just have so much of it, or they have it on the reserves, or they've budgeted for it. So it's way easier to just sink a CapEx project where they own the chargers, they own the software, they're collecting 100% of the revenue. Those are theirs. True CapEx. In a charging as a service model into the monthly lease or the monthly, rental, however you want to, look at it, it is now becoming an OPEX versus a CapEx. And some real estate groups are actually really attracted to the OPEX model because maybe they don't have all of that capital on hand to just sink on a given project. And this OPEX now allows them to forecast and budget, for the next 3, 4, 5 years. They know that monthly payment is going to be the exact same every month for 5 years, let's call it. And they're still going to collect all of the revenue off of these devices. So it's just a really nice, it's just another alternative financial vehicle in which owners and operators have, at their fingertips.
Excellent. So, Jeremy, we are gonna now switch to some shorts and real questions. It's like 1 minute answers. All right. So I'll ask you the first one in one sentence. What's the single biggest mistake a property owner makes when they decide to just add a few EV chargers? All right. So let's go for it. Jeremy, in one sentence, what's the single biggest mistake a property owner makes when they decide to just add a few EV chargers without a proper strategy?
The biggest mistake is that property manager not surveying the current lot or garage. If they were to survey that lot or garage and actually see the number of EVs that are in that said lot or garage, I'm willing to bet there was a lot more than they anticipated, probably that outweighs the number of chargers that they're going to put in.
Excellent. We'll go for the second one. A property manager says they will think about EV charging in a few years when more of their residents have EVs. What do you say to them?
I would say they're already late. Again, the way we started this conversation, Ravi, started around incentives, around rebates and grants and programs that are out there to offset the project. They should be absolutely taking advantage of those programs now, because if they wait, that capital project is going to be significantly more expensive without the free money. And two, they're likely not servicing the type of residents in which that they want at their buildings. These residents are very smart. And if you're not offering EV charging at your property and they drive an EV, they will likely not be leasing at your property because the other building is already satisfying their needs and you are not.
Good one. Jeremy, what does working with Switch actually look like for a real estate operator from day one? And what makes it different from going with a traditional charging vendor?
For us, we put ourselves in the owners and operators' shoes. I can tell you this, before I was in EV charging, I was in real estate and I was on the operator side. And one of the things that I personally do is I put myself in that operator's shoe. And when I'm speaking, to these operators, now being on the vendor side, I really understand the pain that they're going through and really what is our value add to them. And I think our value add to them versus maybe a traditional charging vendor is we are agnostic on our hardware offering, which means we don't make proprietary technology. A lot of times people don't like proprietary because that means if it breaks, you're either stuck with it or you have to get rid of it. Switch eliminated that barrier where we work with a variety of hardware vendors. The software is OCPP, which means Open Charge Point Protocol, which means that if you're not happy with us as a solutions provider, you can switch, just like your phone or your network. Similar business model. The other one is understanding the actual real estate ecosystem. So real estate as a whole, while it is bricks and mortar, it has evolved so much into prop tech, these technologies that are essentially supporting the built environment. And the way that Switch is built and set up is its ability to support the built environment and also the other building platforms that are being used. So as a software company, we are able to integrate into other smart platforms such as property management systems for data, reporting, maintenance, reservation systems, EV charging now in the mix. Also, smart parking applications, the rise of being able to read license plate reading and facial recognition and car recognition. We now are another layer in there when it comes to EV charging. Absolutely frictionless. So really, other charging vendors are just very interested in just what I call selling boxes. They're just trying to plant the flag, land and expand, land grab. It's not the way that we look at it. It is a full consultative approach because, again, not one size fits all. And each EV charging project is completely different than the next. So we just look at it very holistically across the ecosystem.
All right, we'll end it here. That was an insightful conversation, Jeremy. Thank you so much for your time with us today.
My pleasure, Ravi. Thanks so much for having me on. Excellent questions. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy.